Okay, first of all, my name's Tom Kovacs. I'm a professor here, also the coordinator of the Interdisciplinary Environmental Science and Society program. We have a program office which is up in 301V, Mark Jefferson Science Complex, so the third floor of this building. We have student workers that always man the office. They are in the IESS program, so you can also go to them if you have questions about the program and you want a student view. And so those workers are Clarissa up here, Chris, and then we have another one, Caitlin, who's not here. I thought she was going to be here, so maybe she'll be here later. When you declare the major, if you haven't declared the major yet, when you declare the major, then I'm aware that you are a major and you get on our email list, which is important because we try to develop a community within our program. So we send out all sorts of information, probably on average once a day, on things like course offerings and programmatic changes, environmental group type activities, so you get together with some other students, you can do environmental type activities. We have all sorts of fun and educational environmental activities too, individual and group. Internships is another thing that is important in the program because that satisfies or could satisfy one of our programmatic requirements. So we try and announce those. And public talks, if there's any kind of public talks. And we put that on our website too. Our website's www.emish.edu/IESS. So you can get all that information, a lot of that information there too. We also have a Facebook group page, which if you're on our email list, we're soon going to send out an invitation to that group page. That has some of the same information, but also you can talk amongst yourselves to we would like to see in the future people who are out on internships, if they have any problems or questions, they can post things to the community, and maybe we could work together to solve those environmental issues. The program has one major and one minor. The major is called Interdisciplinary Environmental Science and Society. The minor is called Sustainability. I'm going to talk about both programs. The major has a number of emphases which will become concentrations in the near future, we hope. But for right now, they're just emphases. Environmental science has atmosphere and climate, environmental biology, environmental chemistry, environmental geoscience, and environmental hydrology. And then there's another concentration, environment and society. That's the concentration, there's no emphases in there. Okay, just to sort of go over the types of things that you could do with the various concentrations within the major. And I'm going to use an example from some of our summer interns. So Lucy is here. In fact, she was on the internship that I'm going to predominantly use as an example. So maybe she could chime in and help me if I need it. So over the summer, there was a pond by Thurston Elementary School called the Thurston Nature Center. And the pond was dying. It had large loss of animal and plant life due to runoff issues and due to fertilizers. So I'm going to use that pond and the things that our students did there as an example of the various things that you can do with different concentrations within the major. So the first one, atmosphere and climate. This one's a little hard to apply directly to the pond because it's more of a large-scale type concentration. But for example, we have climate change occurring, and that climate change affects extreme weather events. And those extreme weather events could include things like heavier rainfall events, in which case you have more runoff, which could have affected the pond here. If we have more runoff, that causes problems to the pond. We can have drought. So you have feast or famine with climate change. There's shifting patterns with rainfall. Some places are going to have more rainfall. Some places will have less. And that will affect the environment. And so studying that is a hot topic in the atmosphere and in climatology. Temperatures, extreme temperatures can affect ecosystems and crop production, so could drought and excessive rainfall. So how that's going to play out is the type of things you would study within that concentration. Environmental biology. So remediating the pond requires surveys of the organisms in and around the pond. So that is something that an environmental biologist would do. We would also need to determine how to protect the organisms in the pond if we're going to remediate the pond. We'd have to drain the pond, decide what we're going to do with those organisms. Again, an environmental biologist would serve that role. And also, we would want to determine, once we are done remediating the pond, what type of plant and animal species we want to introduce to the area in order to make a healthy ecosystem. So those are the types of things that an environmental biologist would do. Then we have environmental chemistry. So the environmental chemist would identify pollutant issues in the pond. So they would be the people that would find out, for example, that the soil underneath the pond was full of phosphates and the oxygen level in the pond was low, and that was causing some of the issues with the pond. And so they would also find out what the source of that pollution is, so pollution sources. You would find out, for example, that in this case it may have been fertilizers in the surrounding neighborhood. Identifying that and then deciding how that affects the pond and how to remediate that would be the focus of the environmental chemist. Then you've got environmental hydrology. So the environmental hydrologist's job in this example would identify runoff issues. Past decisions were made to use the pond as a retention area for runoff from the residential development that built up around the nature area. And so that became a problem for the ecosystem. Not only that, but because you had excessive runoff into the pond during large rain events, the berms that were holding the pond broke and caused the pond to essentially leak out. And when you have water that's constantly being leaked out, it's hard to keep life within that pond. So the hydrologist's job in this case would be to determine ways to redirect or slow the runoff and to strengthen the berms to keep the pond intact. Okay, then you have environmental geoscience. An environmental geoscientist would understand the soils in and around the pond and how runoff and pollution infiltrate into the ground. They also would determine, once we remediate the pond, the best way to stratify soils, gravels, and rocks in order to strengthen the berms, and also to create, one of the things we decided, or at least the environmental biologist decided, was that we needed an island to help reptiles and amphibians bask. And so the environmental geoscience would know how to stratify the island to keep the island intact. And then those are all of the environmental science concentration, or emphases now. We also have environment and society. So let me just explain kind of how an environment and society person would attack that issue. Although in this case we didn't have anyone working at that pond, but we had people working at various watershed councils in the area. And so some of the things that they do is they would understand the regulations and advocate for the protection of these natural areas. So they may advocate, they could have advocated previously, that the decision to build these residential areas and to use the pond as a retention area would be detrimental to the pond. So they would have advocated either to not build the residential areas there or to find some other way to handle the runoff. They would also educate people on environmental issues and create outreach programs to individuals to reduce runoff and also to reduce fertilizer that use phosphates that were detrimental to the pond in this case. They could also create outreach programs to retailers to label environmentally friendly products. So that would be another example of someone from Environment and Society, what they would do. They would fundraise for their nonprofit organizations. They could be activists. They could be lobbyists. And again, they could be educators and outreach. So although there's all sorts of nonprofit organizations that do those type of things, that's what you would do with the Environment and Society concentration.